So today we are going back in time and looking at an old Black Ops conspiracy involving the assassination of JFK, carried out by Alex Mason. And especially because of the recent declassification of the JFK files, this is an interesting one, so let's take it back to the beginning. Alex Mason was a CIA Special Activities Agent. In 1961, when he was a member of a CIA assassination squad known as Operation 40, he, along with other members of the squad, Bowman and Woods, infiltrated Cuba prior to the Bay of Pigs invasion in order to assassinate Fidel Castro. When they arrived there, Mason, Bowman and Woods raided the compound where Castro was staying, but as I'm sure you know if you've played the campaign, instead they encountered Castro's body double. They didn't know that at the time, in which Mason killed him. They then tried to escape as they were being chased down by Cuban military forces. They eventually made it back to the plane ready to take off, but at the last minute, Mason bailed out to clear the Cuban military vehicles off the runway, but unfortunately for him was subdued and captured by their troops. And when he finally regained consciousness, he watched as Fidel Castro, alive and well, turned Mason over to someone called Dragovich, a former Soviet general, as a gift for their new alliance. He was then transported to a Soviet labor camp in Vorkuta, Russia, and it was there Dragovich and Steiner, a German scientist and ex-Nazi who created the Nova 6 chemical weapon along with Kravchenko, brainwashed Mason. They implant him with the knowledge to interpret a broadcast sequence that only he could understand, essentially programming him to become a Soviet sleeper agent. Every time Mason was to hear these Soviet broadcasts, he would follow whatever commands they were telling him. And the main purpose of all of this, the main objectives they gave to him, was to assassinate the President of the United States, JFK. But because Mason's responses to their orders had been sporadic, he was fighting against them. Dragovich, not knowing if he would be any use to him then, had him taken back to his cell.
The subject has been successfully implanted with the knowledge to translate the number sequences.
So, what is the problem?
His responses to our orders have been sporadic, unpredictable. He shows a remarkable resilience.
Why?
He is unusual, atypical. Few men possess such will. Our other test subjects have been far more successful.
If he will not follow the orders embedded in the numbers, then he is of no use to me. He can run. Take him back to his cell.
However, 18 months earlier, someone called Reznov, who was a captain of the Red Army and served in the 3rd Shock Army under the orders of Kravchenko and Dragovich, was, as he would put it, betrayed by them, captured and sent to the Vorkuta prison camp. And so when Mason arrived here 18 months later, Reznov managed to sabotage Mason's brainwashing, reprogramming him to kill Steiner, Kravchenko and Dragovich.
The pain is difficult, isn't it? We are brothers, Mason. We are the same. Dragovich, Kravchenko, Steiner, all must die.
But we learn in the ending of the game that Mason did in fact kill JFK. He can be seen next to him in some tapes on the day of his assassination. But all is not as simple as it seems. There is a lot more that goes into this. The first thing, of course, being, well, if Mason was reprogrammed by Reznov to kill Steiner, Kravchenko and Dragovich, why did he still play a role in what happened to JFK? Well, in the campaign, about 6 weeks after Mason had been brainwashed, he was thrown into Vorkuta's labor camp, where he was befriended by Reznov and they plotted to escape Vorkuta. On October the 6th, 1963, along with all of the other prisoners, they broke out, where Mason managed to escape, travelling back to the US, unaware that he was ever brainwashed, and Reznov, unbeknown to him, actually died during the escape. But because Mason didn't see it himself, he had already gone, he was also unaware that happened. Anyway, when he arrived back at the US, it was there the number sequence began and he started his mission to locate and kill Dragovich. But in one of the campaign missions called USDD, Mason, of course still being a CIA agent, travels to the Pentagon with Hudson, who is his handler, and is given orders to begin Operation Flashpoint, which involves sabotaging the Soviet space program and locating and killing Dragovich. But whilst Mason is sitting there in front of JFK, he hallucinates and points a gun towards him, about to shoot him.
Dragovich.
And during this same time, Mason is hearing the number sequence in his head, which is causing him to experience this, proving that even though he was reprogrammed by Reznov, Dragovich's orders to assassinate JFK was still there, but in this instance, Mason, being strong-willed, fought against it. Not long after, on November the 17th, 1963, Operation Flashpoint was initiated. Mason and the CIA infiltrated a Soviet cosmodrome, hunting down Dragovich, where they found him in his car, they cornered him, destroyed it, but instead of confirming that he was dead, just assuming he was from the explosion, the mission was deemed a success. Obviously, Dragovich was still alive. But 5 days after Operation Flashpoint, on November the 22nd, 1963, you'll recognise this date because it was the day JFK was assassinated. Now, in real life and in the game, the person that was claimed to be responsible for this was Lee R.V. Oswald. He shot Kennedy from the 6th floor window of a Texas school book depository as he was travelling by motorcade. About 45 minutes after assassinating Kennedy, Oswald then murdered a Dallas police officer, in which he then slipped into a movie theatre where he was arrested by the police for Tippett's murder, but he was later charged with the assassination of Kennedy. Of course, all the time, denying responsibility for the killing, claiming that he was a fall guy. And it was 2 days after this event, Oswald was then shot by someone else, a local nightclub owner called Jack Ruby. All of this was broadcast live on TV. But ever since then, there have been conspiracies surrounding JFK's death. One of the more prominent ones, that there was 2 shooters. And here's where the Black Ops story takes a turn, because after the events of Operation Flashpoint and just before the events of Kennedy's assassination, Mason went MIA. There were points in his life where he just went missing, points where the CIA couldn't account for what he was doing. Mason just went off-grid, and there is no official confirmation of what he got up to in that time. But one of the major events that happened whilst he was MIA was the assassination of JFK, and like I said, we can see in the tape reels, on that day, Mason was there in the crowd. Now, you could say, okay, but this isn't confirmation Mason had something to do with it, although it's highly suspicious he was programmed to do this and he was MIA from the CIA during this time. But as you continue to progress through the campaign, 5 years after going missing, he returns to the CIA to join up with the SOG unit, led by Woods, where they were sent to Vietnam and Laos. When Mason was here, he began hallucinating that Reznov had joined up with him. What he didn't know was that this was just a figment of his imagination. He was still unaware that Reznov actually died in Vorkuta and thought he had come here to join him in killing Kravchenko. And then after a few other events happened, Mason travelled to Rebirth Island where Steiner was, with the imaginary Reznov by his side, where he confronted Steiner and started to beat him. However, all this time, because Mason was hallucinating, he believed it was Reznov who was beating Steiner. Obviously, because Steiner was the key behind Novosibirsk gas and understanding the broadcast sequence, the CIA wanted him alive, but Mason, overcome by Reznov's brainwashing, shoots and kills Steiner moments before the CIA, Hudson and Weaver can stop him. Like I said, all this time, Mason thought he was the one witnessing Reznov kill Steiner, when it was actually him. Anyway, because of this, Mason was constrained by Hudson and taken back to America to be interrogated. And during these interrogations, which you are witnessing in these cutscenes, it is Hudson and Weaver behind the glass attempting to get Mason to tell them what the broadcast sequence means, to tell them what orders Dragovich implanted in him, what he was told to do, and to try and understand where the broadcast sequence was being emitted from. After lots of interrogation and Hudson and Weaver still not breaking through to Mason, they play their final card. Hudson reveals himself to Mason, basically saying to him, "Luke, I know that you're a Russian sleeper agent. I know they messed with you, but I don't think you're a traitor." He unbuckles him from his chair. Mason then punches Hudson, starts to run away, where some of his memories start to come back. But eventually, Hudson catches up to him, knocks Mason out, which seems to knock some sense into him, where he plays the number sequence one last time for Mason, and his coding is finally broken, sort of, because Mason reveals to him that the instructions for the broadcast sequence are coming from the Rizalka, which is a ship that is stationed in Cuba. Hudson, Mason and Weaver then travel to the Rizalka, where they hop on board and confront Dragovich.
Dragovich.
You should have been my finest agent. It would have all been so much simpler.
Dragovich!
Yes! I'm gonna kill you! Try to fuck with my mind! You failed! You don't know anything! You tried to turn me against my own! Tried to make me kill my own president!
Tried?
Come on, Mason!
In the final few words before Mason kills Dragovich, Mason says to him, "You tried to make me kill my own president," and Dragovich says, "Tried?" Obviously inferring to the fact that he was successful. Mason carried out the orders and the assassination of JFK was down to him. But there is still a lot more to this. Going back to the moments before Mason's brainwashing was broken, as he was travelling through the hallways of where he was interrogated, listen to this.
Oh, the pain! Oh my god!
21, 17, 14.
Proceed!
As he is hearing the number sequence, he says, "Proceed to target. Oswald compromised." Could this play into the real life conspiracy that Mason was the second shooter? And more so, Oswald was also a Russian sleeper agent, and Steiner makes clear Mason wasn't their only test subject.
Our other test subjects have been far more successful.
The two of them were programmed to take out JFK. There are a few different routes you could go down with this. One, in the Black Ops universe, Oswald was supposed to take out JFK, but before he could do so, he was discovered by the police, and because he was compromised, Mason then shot JFK, but Mason was never found and Oswald was, so he was believed to be the killer. The second option is both Mason and Oswald shot JFK, and as they tried to escape, Mason was successful, whereas Oswald wasn't, he was compromised. Or the third option is this was a part CIA cover-up. Again, Oswald and Mason, both sleeper agents, killed JFK, but because Mason was a CIA agent, not wanting that to get out, his involvement was covered up by the CIA, and Oswald took all of the rap. You could understand that. If the public found out a CIA agent was actually a Russian sleeper agent and took out the President of the United States, the CIA may very well want to cover that information up, because for something like that to get out in the public, that a CIA agent had killed the President, whether he was brainwashed or not, would be tragic. The theory I would be most likely to go down, because Mason says, "Proceed to target, Oswald compromised," makes it sound like Oswald was supposed to be the main shooter to kill JFK, but he was found out, and so Mason went in as the backup and killed him. Both Oswald and Mason were Russian sleeper agents, and actually in real life, just reading what it says online, Oswald displayed a pro-Soviet attitude and even taught Russian himself. While some claims suggest ties between Oswald and the Soviet KGB, the official investigations say that he acted alone. However, one notable point to take into consideration is that Oswald did visit both the Cuban and Soviet embassies in Mexico City before he assassinated Kennedy. So perhaps Troyok played into that, and Oswald was in fact a Soviet sleeper agent, just like Mason. If you listen to what Mason says during the clip where he's shown to be at the scene, he recounts some of the events that happened.
17, 0, 10, 2, 23, 1, 8, 11, 25, 22,
22.
9, 4,
6.5 millimeter.
9, 23, 1, 12, 0, 12, 16,
11, 22.
6, 12, 8, 4, 1, 6, 2, 10, 2, 1.
Texas.
He says 22 referring to the 22nd of November, the date that it happened, 6.5mm, Texas. Mason is recalling important events of JFK's assassination almost as if these were phrases or important parts that were programmed into his head. He is in Texas, 6.5mm. on the 22nd of November. And going back to that moment when Mason almost assassinated JFK for the first time when they met up in the Pentagon, but he stopped himself, you see for a brief second moments of the day of JFK's assassination, even though this was 12 days before. There is a mugshot of Oswald right there. Something else of interest is in the Black Ops computer terminal, you can access JFK's files and look at his mail, and you will see messages from two people named John Trent and Evelyn Cross. This one sent to JFK on the 26th of June 1963, 5 months before his assassination, from Evelyn Cross. She said to him, "He won't ask you again, and I know this was his final offer. Please reconsider before we leave Berlin, or your life will be in danger. Our people are everywhere. This time, you cannot win." give him what he wants before it's too late. And then starting 3 days before JFK was assassinated, someone by the name of John Trent sent multiple emails. This one was to Hudson on the 19th of November. He said, "You don't know me, but I know Alex Mason. You will learn to trust me. Everything changes on Friday." Friday, of course, being the date of JFK's death. And then 1 day before his assassination, on November the 21st, 1963, John Trent sent a message to JFK saying, "Victory cannot be achieved without sacrifice," along with another message to Hudson on that same day which said, "It was by the hand of Dragovich. This is just the beginning. They are everywhere. Start at Vorkuta to escape the breakout. You know one of them, the other one just died." 3 days after JFK was assassinated, John Trent then sent another message to Hudson, along with a number sequence, which said, "Her name is Evelyn Cross. This photo is for your eyes only. This will be my last letter for quite some time. When the time comes, you will know what to do." And when you decode this number sequence, it reads, Oswald compromised. And then 5 years later, on February the 22nd, 1968, this John Trent sent one final message to Hudson, which said, "Please tell Mason one last thing. This time, it's freedom for both of us." So this John Trent clearly knows about the number sequence, he knows of Mason, he knows of the Vorkuta breakout, and it's speculated that John Trent is Reznov. You could kind of tell that by the wording, right? However, if you look at the date, that's impossible because Reznov died in 1963, whereas we have an email from this John Trent years later. And remember, Mason went MIA for 5 years. John Trent messaged Hudson on November the 25th, 1963, and then he wasn't heard from again until 5 years later in 1968, the exact time frame that Mason was MIA for. So what I believe's happening here is just like in the campaign, this is Mason believing he is Reznov sending these messages. You can tell by the wording, this time it's freedom for both of us. That's something Reznov would say, but it can't be him, meaning this is Mason believing Reznov is still by his side. The only thing I will question is in one of the emails to Hudson when he said, "Start at Vorkuta to escape the breakout. You know one of them, the other one just died." Well, Mason never knew Reznov died, so I would have to assume he's referring to someone else unless in the back of his mind, deep down, he knew it. But to do this video, well, Mason is pretty much warning JFK, saying to Hudson that on Friday everything changes, and a day before Friday he tells JFK victory cannot be achieved without sacrifice. He was warning them without directly telling them that the president is going to die. The final thing I do want to touch on is if Reznov sabotaged Mason's brainwashing to kill alternate people, then why did he still go along with Dragovich's orders to kill JFK? Why did that still work if he was reprogrammed? It could be that those orders never went away. They were still there in the back of his mind, but like we saw in that one mission, Mason was trying to resist killing JFK because it was no longer his main priority, but it was still there in the back of his mind. Or perhaps Reznov knew in order for Mason to kill Kravchenko, Steiner, and Dragovich, he would still need to kill JFK. It seems like both Oswald and Mason were Russian sleeper agents. They assassinated JFK, however, Oswald was compromised and Mason got away with it. Whether or not the CIA found out and then covered up for Mason because he was one of their agents is unclear. I would say unlikely because he still carried on to work for the CIA after that. You would think if they knew, then they wouldn't allow him to continue to work for them because the effects of his brainwashing were still evident after that. Anyway, there we go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.